Important update about YouTube playlists. Hey everyone. We've received many messages asking why our YouTube playlists aren't showing up. Do we create YouTube playlists? Yes, we absolutely do. So why can't you see them? Honestly, we're not sure. We've been in contact with YouTube support for several months now, but we still haven't received a clear answer or solution. After much discussion, our team has decided to take matters into our own hands. We believe the issue might be related to the number of playlists we've created on a single channel, possibly too many. Our solution? We're launching 2 additional YouTube channels, giving us a total of 3. This way, we can organize our audiobooks better and avoid the playlist visibility issue in the future. This change only affects our YouTube audience. If you're a patron supporter, you can still access all our audiobooks by visiting the collection menu on Patreon. Thanks so much for your time and continued support. Happy listening. Are you a masochist? Although this area was generally safe, it was quite late now. It was better to be safe than sorry. And Soyo's arm strength was actually far greater than his current strength. But as he pulled her towards the sedan that had brought her here, the girl didn't struggle at all. I feel like this scumbag is a little angry. Is he worried about me? Thinking of this, Soyo's cheeks felt strangely hot. Wait, what am I thinking? Miss Soyo quickly shook her head, regaining her senses. By this time, she had already been pushed into the car by him. Well then, good night, Miss Soyo. Who's saying good night to you? Soyo retorted subconsciously, but she allowed him to close the car door and let the sedan take her away. Coming to her senses, the girl stared blankly at the scenery flashing past the car window. The figures of Sakiko, Matsumi Wakaba, and even Kamijo Matsumi appeared in her mind one after another, shifting and alternating. What on earth should I do? The girl murmured, burying her face in her arms. On the other side, after watching Soyo leave, Kamijo Matsumi also turned and walked up the stairs. The problem of Great God Saki still needed to be solved by him. And as he arrived in the living room, the expressions on the other girls' faces were a bit confused. After all, Great God Saki came up a while ago. What were you doing downstairs? However, he had no intention of explaining himself to them. He just asked Matsumi Wakaba where she was. The answer was unsurprising, in her own room. To be precise, it should be the room that originally belonged to her. Although he had bought this large mansion from the Toyokawa family, he hadn't changed the layout of her room. And Great God Saki was currently curled up on her bed, a large lump under the covers. Saki-chan? He called out tentatively, but there was no response. Sakiko? Great God Saki? Customer service Saki? Soyo-chan, Sakiko is right inside. Don't let her in. Hearing Soyo's name, Sakiko shot up as if electrocuted, throwing off the covers and shouting in a panic. Then, she realized there was no Soyo, only him standing by her bed, looking at her with a teasing expression. Is it fun to trick me like this? Great God Saki asked, her cheeks slightly red, her tone filled with dissatisfaction. It seems Soyo has left quite a shadow on you. I never thought, she said, immediately getting agitated at the mention of Soyo. That Soyo would actually. She never minded assuming the worst of Soyo, but she still hadn't expected her to be capable of something like this. I just mentioned it casually. I didn't think she would actually take it seriously. So it was you who gave her the terrible idea? She had known it. Soyo liked to be clingy, but she wouldn't go so far as to do something like this. Sakiko's face was grim. She said in a cold voice, should I be thanking you for this? You're welcome. Kamijo Matsumi was never one to lack the virtue of modesty. Chapter 57. Good grief, you're actually being modest now? Can't you tell she's being sarcastic? However, faced with this scumbag who seemed to care about nothing, and who was also her boss and creditor, Great God Saki was out of options. By the way. However, Kamijo Matsumi, standing opposite her, seemed to remember something. Then, under her somewhat dazed gaze, he pulled the shoe and stocking Soyo had given him from his pocket. This. Soyo asked me to return it to you. At this point, is there any meaning in giving it back? Sakiko felt completely numb. What's the point of taking it off only to give it back to me? Perhaps Soyo thought this was her way of making amends, but Great God Saki only felt mocked and uncomfortable. Don't give it to me. I don't want it. Sakiko said, burying her head in her pillow, her voice muffled. The thought that this stuff had been pulled off her by Soyo and had already passed through 2 people's hands instantly extinguished any desire she had to reclaim it. Get it away from me. Don't even come close. Does that mean you're giving it to me, Saki-chan? Great God Saki silently typed out a question mark. I just said I don't want it. Did I ever imply that? I will treasure Sakiko's gift. I won't disturb you any longer. He didn't give her a chance to speak. After saying this with a serious face, He turned and left. Wait. Great God, Saki quickly sat up, but could only stare blankly at the closed bedroom door. Why isn't that guy out yet? In the living room, Miss Anon couldn't help but speak up, seeing that there was no movement from the room for a long time. Matsumi-chan, he's not going to do anything bad to Saki-chan, is he? Matsumi wouldn't do that. Matsumi Wakaba said, defending her fiancé against the pink-haired girl's slander. He is my fiancé. Anon didn't reply, but her opinion hadn't changed in the slightest. She'd sooner believe that Soyo could win back Great God Saki than believe in this guy's moral character. She hadn't forgotten that this guy had wanted to kiss her during the voice recording at the company, and it turned out he had a fiancé the whole time. Pa, scumbag. Thinking this, the annoyance in Anon's heart grew stronger. Just then, the door to Sakiko's bedroom finally opened. However, only Kamijo Matsumi walked out, his hand seemingly holding something. As he got closer, the girls finally got a clear look at what was in his hands. It was a small leather shoe and a black ankle sock. And if they weren't mistaken, those two items should have originally belonged to the Sakiko in the room. In that instant, the girls all wondered if they were hallucinating. What on earth did you do to Great God Saki? Faced with the girls' indescribable stares, not only did he not feel embarrassed, but a smile even touched his lips, like a proud emperor. Then, he slowly raised the shoe and stocking in his hands, as if a champion lifting his trophy, or an emperor raising his crown. In that moment, the girls felt as if they were witnessing the coronation of a monarch. This is a gift from the wise and beautiful Miss Sakiko. The boys' slightly smug words shook the girls' hearts. To think that Sakiko would. Were the two of them really playing such wild games in there just now? Have we fallen behind the times? I'm not, I didn't, don't talk nonsense. Her reputation thoroughly damaged, Great God Saki couldn't even be bothered to be emo anymore. Without even putting on her other shoe, she rushed out of the room to clear her name. Then, seeing him proudly holding up her shoe and stocking in front of Tamari and the others, her sanity instantly evaporated, and she transformed into a fuming steam engine. Shut up and give them back to me. She lunged forward and tackled him to the ground, trying to take back what was originally hers. Didn't you say you were giving them to me, Saki-chan? Since it had fallen into his hands, as a qualified capitalist, he naturally had to protect his private property. I never said that. Just say I went back on my word, alright. Although Sakiko didn't want them herself, she didn't dare to leave them in his hands. He had already pulled off such a big stunt in such a short time. She couldn't even imagine what he would dare to do next. Watching the two of them wrestling on the floor over a shoe and a stocking, the other girls couldn't help but fall silent. The situation was too surreal, their brains had completely crashed. They couldn't understand it, but they were greatly shaken. And that Sakiko, she can actually make that kind of expression? And Matsumi Wakaba, looking at the two bizarre people before her, was silent for a moment before adding to Anon. In name only. Just then, their struggle came to an end with Miss Sakiko's victory. Kamijo Matsumi, his old wounds not yet healed, was ultimately unable to protect his private property from the woman who had gone back on her word. However, Great God Saki, the victor of this war, showed no signs of happiness. Instead, clutching her shoe and stocking, she ran back into her room, her face beet red. Bang. Clearly, Great God Saki had gone back to being emo. Therefore, the girls could only turn their gazes back to Kamijo Matsumi. At this moment, he was lying on the floor, his hands crossed over his chest, his eyes tightly shut. He looked as if he had passed away peacefully. Miss Ano stood up and tentatively poked his waist with her foot. Are you still alive? The user you have dialed is currently dead. Please revive with a pretty girl's kiss. Good grief, trying to trick me into a kiss again? Hearing this sudden announcement, Anon's cheeks flushed slightly, but then she seemed to remember something and puffed out her cheeks angrily. However, Miss Ano was unaware. She wouldn't kiss him, but there were others who would. At the very least, upon hearing her fiancé's words, Matsumi Wakaba subconsciously started to get up. However, someone else was closer, and faster. Tamari. Taki only looked away for a moment, and somehow, Tamari had already knelt down beside him and planted a light, fleeting, dragonfly-like back on his cheek. Tamari, why are you kissing someone else's fiancé? Watching this scene, Anon was also stunned. She subconsciously looked at Matsumi Wakaba next to her, only to find that the green-haired doll had also stood up at some point and was staring at Tamari and Kamijo Matsumi with a blank expression. Feeling the soft, warm, and moist touch that was there and gone in an instant, Kamijo Matsumi, who hadn't expected anyone to actually kiss him, subconsciously opened his eyes. And then, he saw Tamari staring at him with her big, amber eyes, unblinking. Chapter 58. How is it you, Tamari-chan? The person who kissed him was also a bit of a surprise to Kamijo Matsumi. However, it was the kind of surprise that felt unexpected yet somehow logical. And Tamori and he stared at each other. As if she felt her previous spec wasn't enough to revive him, she pursed her lips, seemingly wanting to kiss him again. But just then, Taki, who was standing to the side, finally reacted and quickly held back the cute little penguin. Tamori, what are you doing? Taki rarely raised her voice at Tamori, her face flushed red, but this time it was from anger. How could you kiss? This time, her voice carried a hint of shyness. Kiss that guy? Because Matsumi wanted a kiss. Faced with a seemingly angry Taki, the little penguin replied dazedly. He asked for a kiss, so you just kissed him? Ms. Taki almost laughed in exasperation. Because it's Matsumi. Even if it's him, you can't. Tamari. However, the person before her was, after all, Tamari. So, Taki suppressed her emotions and advised her with earnest and well-meaning words. A kiss is very important for a girl. It must be with her future. Taki said, her voice becoming slightly softer, her cheeks flushing. This time it was genuinely out of shyness. After all, even a pressure freak is still a girl. Her future husband. So, in the future, you absolutely can't just casually. However, listening to Taki's advice, Tamori couldn't help but think of the marriage application she had swiped from his car. According to Taki, does that mean as long as I marry him, I can kiss him whenever I want? It was a good thing Miss Taki didn't know what Tamori was thinking. Otherwise, she would have definitely seen red. After admonishing Tamori, Taki looked at the girl's obedient appearance and felt that her words should have had an effect, so she didn't continue her assault. It's getting very late now, he said, standing up. After Taki had finished, he also made a suggestion. Why don't you all just stay here tonight? My house has a lot of rooms. We can all hang out together. If you get tired, you can just go straight to sleep. It's no problem. Huh? Spend the night here? Faced with his suggestion, Ms. Taki was the most resistant. Because of what had just happened, she felt it was dangerous just to have him and Tamari in the same space. But what this guy says is true. It really is late. However, Miss Anu held a different opinion. How about we treat it as our band's first sleepover? Unlike Taki's resistance, Miss Anon seemed very enthusiastic. She didn't mind his presence, she just thought it would be nice. Of course, the key was that everyone was here. If it were just her alone, even with Matsumi Wakaba, she would definitely not dare to stay over. But with so many of them now, what could he possibly do? It was such a nice, big house, it would be a waste not to stay. And it was a good opportunity to deepen the bond between the band members. Tamori naturally leaned towards agreeing with him, and Rana didn't care either, so the matter was settled. Watching the girls take out their phones to message their parents, Kamijo Matsumi glanced at Great God Saki's bedroom and then looked away. And because Tamori and the others were staying the night, Matsumi Wakaba's workload for dinner increased. However, seeing this, Anon immediately offered to help in the kitchen. Although she was a rich girl, her cooking skills were not bad. After her was Taki. Although she was a pressure freak, she was a good child who worked part-time to support her studies. Naturally, she wasn't someone who had never done housework. Therefore, with their help, Matsumi Wakaba's task was actually much easier than usual. As for Kamijo Matsumi, he was naturally waiting for dinner with Tamari and Rena. Dinner was quickly prepared. Now there was only one last problem, one person was not at the table. That's right, it was Great God Saki. She was still in her room, being emo. Even Taki, who disliked her the most, couldn't say something like let her starve for the night. And the task of asking her to come out for dinner naturally fell to him. When he got to the room, Great God Saki was still curled up in a ball on the bed, just like last time. Saki-chan? What is it? This time, Sakiko didn't deliberately ignore him. Be good, don't throw a tantrum. Come out and eat dinner. Don't use that tone with me. His tone, as if he were coaxing a child, instantly broke her defenses. She threw off the covers and said, and I'm not hungry. You can eat by yourself. Growl. However, just as the words left her mouth, her stomach rumbled with perfect comedic timing. Her face instantly slapped, Sakiko's cheeks flushed, but she didn't try to forcefully save face. Instead, she said directly, I don't want to eat anyway. Leave me alone. Saki-chan, if you don't behave, I'll call Soyo to come and get you. Looking at the clearly still pouting Great God Saki, he directly used his ultimate move. You. If she was merely annoyed with Soyo before, after what happened today, she was clearly left with a considerable shadow of trauma. Therefore, seeing that he was about to call Soyo, she immediately became anxious. I'll go out with you. In the end, Great God Saki surrendered. However, as soon as she reached the living room, she immediately regretted it. The moment she came out, 5 pairs of eyes were staring straight at her. Wait, Why are they still here? Sakiko had originally thought that Tamori and the others had all gone home, which was why she was willing to come out with him. Seeing that there were still people here, she immediately wanted to turn around and go back to being emo. After all, after what had just happened, she really didn't want to appear in front of them. And she didn't know how to face Tamori. But just as she was about to turn, he directly blocked her path. I went through all that trouble to get you out. How can I let you run back? Coupled with the gazes of Tamori and the others, Sakiko could only find a place to sit down, biting the bullet. And with her arrival, the atmosphere at the dinner table predictably turned cold. Tamori's mood visibly dropped. Taki shot Sakiko a cold snort and then began to take care of her beloved leader. Tamori, don't mind her. Let's eat. She quit, so she quit. Why care so much? It's not like our band is missing her, right? Although Taki's attitude was what she wanted, Sakiko's heart still felt inexplicably heavy. However, she really had no right to be angry. After all, she knew how deeply she had hurt Tamori. If she could, she wouldn't have wanted to. Although she was annoyed with Soyo, deep down, didn't she also want to go back to the way things were? But fate plays tricks on people. She had no right to refuse. The girl named Toyokawa Sakiko had long lost the right to be naive. She didn't want to sing now, she just wanted to make money. Feeling the awkward atmosphere, Anon also felt a bit uncomfortable. However, even she didn't know what to say at this moment. Therefore, she subconsciously glanced at him, wanting him to warm up the atmosphere. Even Miss Ano herself didn't realize that she was subconsciously starting to rely on him. It seems everyone is a bit tense. How about I perform something for you all? As if he had been prepared all along, he said with a smile. Let me sing a song for you all. The young man said with a light laugh, his words nearly giving Anon a PTSD attack. Chapter 59. What? Singing? Hearing Kamijo Matsumi's words, Anon's whole body jolted. She suddenly felt that asking him for help had been a mistake. She would have been better off handling it herself. Clearly, his last performance had left a considerable psychological shadow on the girl. Maybe let's not? The pink-haired girl said with a sheepish laugh. Isn't it a bit much to be singing and dancing during dinner? Objection overruled. Having already made the offer, he naturally wasn't going to start strong and end weak. He directly called over his dedicated accompanist. Rana-chan, you accompany me. Rana, who was in the middle of sneak-eating the pieces of fish in Anon's bowl, immediately got up upon hearing this and cheerfully retrieved her guitar. More guitar playing, yay! At the same time, Matsumi Wakaba, standing to the side, very cooperatively took out the sound system that had been prepared in advance. Kamijo Matsumi used this time to hand the sheet music for the new song to Rana. Yes, he didn't grab the wrong one this time. Do you really have to sing? Watching him pick up the microphone, the unwilling Ano-chan asked pitifully. We've already come this far. If I don't sing, wouldn't I be spoiling everyone's fun? No, I wouldn't mind. Taki, sitting to the side, watched Anon's reaction and couldn't help but feel puzzled. It's just one song. Why is she acting like this? Well then, a song called If One Day I Became Rich, dedicated to a lost girl. After saying this with a smile, he cleared his throat twice. Once Rana's guitar accompaniment started, he began to sing. If one day I became rich. My first choice wouldn't be to travel the world. Although he claimed to know nothing, his singing was actually quite good, not at all inferior to Tamari's. On this point, even Taki had to admit it. However, strange lyrics again. And this rich dog is short on money. As for Anon, after hearing that this song wasn't about her, she let out a huge sigh of relief. Only Sakiko lifted her head, her eyes slightly moved. However, having not been present for the last music party, Great God Saki at this moment was not yet aware of the gravity of the situation. Lying on the world's biggest, softest sofa. Eating, sleeping, waking up to eat again, I'd do that for a year. Rana silently gave that a thumbs up. If one day I became rich, I could keep everyone by my side. Great God Saki, I get it now. Listening to his lyrics, Sakiko didn't react at first. By the time she came to her senses, she found that her eyes had, at some point, filled with tears. After all, this one line that struck right at the soul would make even a more emotional Bang dreamer shed tears, let alone Great God Saki herself. One could say that this line of lyrics was a special attack aimed directly at her. Every day happily eating, drinking, and chatting. Without worrying about tomorrow or separation. Great God Saki couldn't hold it in anymore and broke down in tears again. After all, his lyrics were too vivid. If she were rich, she wouldn't have to be like she was now, her mind filled with thoughts of daily necessities every day. If she were rich, she could keep Tamori and the others by her side. They could be just like in the lyrics, eating, drinking, and being happy every day, occasionally holding a live show, and when they had nothing to do, They could chat over tea at drink, without worrying about the day they would all part ways. If she were rich, she wouldn't have had to quit Crychick, wouldn't have had to cut ties with her former friends. And she wouldn't have unintentionally hurt Tamari so deeply. If she were rich. Sakiko had too many if-onlys. In the end, all this unwillingness could only turn into tears, soaking her clothes and her heart, turning them cold. Seriously, sis, you're actually crying? Watching the tearful great god Saki, Anon couldn't help but scratch her head. Although she had been pretty broken down before, she hadn't cried like this. What's wrong with Sakiko? Saki-chan. Tamari, sitting beside her, also showed a worried expression. Become rich. I'll become rich. His lyrics, to Sakiko's ears, sounded like her own cries. So many people waste their time day and night. As he sang this line, he silently glanced at Anon, causing a question mark to appear above her head. Hey, you're singing, so sing. Why are you looking at me? What, you got a problem with me? Become rich. I'll become rich. And then pretentiously say that money isn't everything. After that was an instrumental break with no specific meaning, after which he continued his assault. If one day I became rich, I would buy all the rare smiles. Hearing this line, the crying Sakiko subconsciously glanced at Mutsumi Wakaba for some reason. But how could there be a smile on a doll's face? And so, great god Saki cried even more sadly. Let all the poor children no longer be timid. Great god Saki, did you help the little penguin become human? Or did you just make her even sadder? Let all the evil people no longer hold the power of speech. Well, that evil person didn't seem to have attended this party. Guess who's not here this time? Soyo. If one day I became rich, I would find a way to turn back time. Not to contribute to humanity's ideals, but just to say to her. Here, he paused, then, as if possessed by Mutsumi Wakaba, delivered a direct critical hit. I'm so sorry. I wish you happiness. In that instant, great god Saki felt as if she had returned to the moment she finished watching the third episode of MyGO. She had used those 4 words to completely break Tamari's heart. But were those the words she really wanted to say to her? In her heart, she truly felt so much remorse towards Tamari. But she couldn't express it honestly. However, his lyrics at this moment completely shattered her defenses. I'm sorry. Sakiko could no longer restrain herself. She threw her arms around Tamari, apologizing as she cried. Tamari, I'm really so sorry. I never thought I would make you so sad. I'm sorry, Tamari. Hey, you. Taki, who had been squeezed to the side, had a displeased look on her face. However, seeing great god Saki crying so hard her voice was about to give out, she ultimately just gave a cold snort and didn't say anything more. It's okay. Faced with Sakiko hugging her and crying, Tamari first froze for a moment, then somewhat clumsily patted her head and began to comfort her. I was never angry at Saki-chan. Never once. In that instant, Tamari felt that the reason Sakiko had quit Crychick was no longer important. Because Sakiko was crying. Chapter 60. Perhaps she still couldn't let go of the former Crychick. But she didn't want Sakiko to be sad because of it. Feeling Tamari's gentleness, great god Saki cried even harder. After all, the more considerate Tamari was, the more selfish she seemed, and the guilt in her heart grew stronger. And with great god Saki's crying as an accompaniment, the melody of Kamijo Matsumi's song grew more and more intense. Become rich. I'll become rich. So many people waste their time day and night. When he looked over, Miss Anno had already clenched her fists. You really think I don't have a temper? I'll become rich. All my troubles will be left at the edge of the sky. The song was now approaching its end. Become rich. I'll become rich. And then say from the bottom of my heart that money isn't everything. As his singing concluded, the living room fell silent again. The only sound that could be heard was the occasional sob from great god Saki. This song of yours? Anon, the sharpest of the girls present, had already vaguely guessed something and looked at him with some hesitation. Just singing randomly, he said with a smile, putting away the microphone under Miss Anno's gaze. Since we're done listening, let's continue eating. You were definitely not singing randomly. The guitar, the amp, the microphone. It was all too smooth. You came completely prepared. But seeing that he didn't want to elaborate, and looking at the still sniffling great god Saki, the high-ek girl knew that some things were better left unsaid. After the song, he and Rana returned to their seats. However, compared to before, the atmosphere at the dinner table was much better. At the very least, the barrier between Tamari and Sakiko was temporarily gone, and Taki was no longer as hostile towards her. As for why great god Saki had cried so hard because of that song, everyone tacitly chose to ignore it. Feeling the change in atmosphere, Mutsumi Wakaba's gaze on a certain someone also became increasingly gentle. While Tamari was cuddling with Sakiko, Her gaze would also drift over in his direction from time to time. However, he paid this no mind. Looking at the harmonious scene before him, he felt it would be a pity not to share it. And so, he took out his phone, snapped a picture of great god Saki and Tamari cuddling, and sent it to a certain Yuri outsider rich wife who was the only one not present. Soyo. Unsurprisingly, a reply came back in a few seconds. Soyo, why are they still at your place? Soyo, how is Sakiko there too? Soyo, and what's with Sakiko and Tamori? In a duplex high-rise elsewhere in Tokyo, Ms. Soyo, who had been lying in bed, had now sat up. She looked at the photo he had sent, her face filled with confusion and anxiety. After all, she had just been looking at the old Krychik website to mend her wounded heart, only for him to suddenly hit her with this. She was instantly overcome with anxiety. Sakiko went back before, but why are Tamari and the others there too? And having witnessed the whole thing, Soyo knew very well the rift between those two, but how are they suddenly so close now? Especially the Sakiko in the photo. She gave off the feeling of white Sakiko. What on earth happened? Soyo felt as if she had missed an entire season. Big capitalist, of course, we had an awesome dinner party together. Guess who wasn't invited? Soyo silently typed a question mark. What, you're having a party without me and now you're rubbing it in my face? Big capitalist, please rest assured, everyone in the band is getting along much more harmoniously now. Tamori and great god Saki have also temporarily made up. Big capitalist, although you weren't here. There was no need to add that last sentence. Big capitalist, in any case, we're going to continue eating now. You just rest well at home, Soyo. How can I possibly rest well when you say that? Looking again at the harmonious and friendly scene in the photo, Soyo's heart skipped a beat. This photo was taken very well. It's just a little not good. In short, she wasn't in it. Oh no. Don't tell me they're planning to cut me out? Soyo, who spent her days thinking about cutting out Anon and Rana, couldn't help but start to panic. And then, Kamijo Matsumi received the same treatment as Saki-chan. However, with his foresight, he had already turned off his phone in advance. And so, Soyo, unable to get a reply, started to get the big sad. Am I really going to be cut out? I don't want that. At least wait another 100 years. Clearly, someone was not going to get any sleep tonight. And unlike Soyo's side, the atmosphere at his place was filled with joy. Especially great god Saki, who felt as if she had returned to the Krychik era. However, she knew in her heart that an illusion was ultimately just an illusion. Some things were not for her to decide. After dinner, since they all had school tomorrow, the girls didn't hang out for too long and instead prepared to wash up and rest. And this villa, which originally belonged to great god Saki, had a large bath big enough to accommodate everyone. Except for him, of course. Even Matsumi Wakaba probably wouldn't agree to that. And since it was a large household, there was no need to worry about conserving water. He didn't even get to enjoy the bandgirl bath water. Sad. Afterward, there was no standard issue pillow fight or anything of the sort. Everyone went back to their own rooms to rest. It was a good thing this was great god Saki's mansion, otherwise, there really might not have been enough rooms. However, just as he was preparing to rest, he heard a knock on his door. Who could it be at this late hour? He opened the door and found great god Saki, dressed in pajamas. Did you get the wrong door for your night raid? Tamari is next door. Great god Saki, who had walked into his bedroom, still seemed to be struggling with something, but hearing his words, she almost couldn't catch her breath. Who would do a night raid on Tamari? Seriously, what kind of image does this guy have of me? Not Tamari? Then don't tell me your target is Matsumi-chan? Why does it have to be them? Can it be you? The moment the words left her mouth, Sakiko immediately realized something was wrong. She lifted her head and, unsurprisingly, met his strange, subtle gaze. So your target wasn't Tamari or Matsumi, but me? That's not impossible. As long as you don't make a move on Matsumi and the others. Who would want to do a night raid on you? No, wait. Great god Saki, who had almost been talked into a corner by him, finally came to her senses. She frowned, her cheeks slightly red, and looked at him. Is it fun to tease me? Chapter 61. So, seeing that Sakiko seemed to be getting genuinely angry, Matsumi Kamijo decided to be serious. What does the great teacher Sakiko want with me? And what's with that weird nickname, Teacher Sakiko? Sakiko had wanted to ask this for a while. But, never mind. Looking at the smiling boy before her, she let out a soft sigh and decided not to dwell on it. Anyway, about what happened before. The girl turned her head slightly, trying to hide the blush on her cheeks, seemingly a little embarrassed. Thank you. In the end, she managed to say the words. What did you say? Am I dreaming already? even though I haven't gone to sleep yet. It wasn't that he was intentionally teasing the girl in front of him, but he truly hadn't expected to hear those words from teacher Sakiko. I said, "Thank you." Matsumi's attitude seemed to provoke Sakiko, and her fair face turned bright red. What kind of image do I have in your mind? Is it so unbelievable that I would thank someone? Isn't it? The high and mighty Miss Sakiko? I'm not high and mighty. Hearing this evaluation again while she was calm, Sakiko frowned, an inexplicable discomfort rising in her heart. Anyway, thank you for what you did for Tamari. There was a hint of self-blame in the girl's voice. If it weren't for you, I probably would have continued to hurt her, wouldn't I? My choice back then was indeed too self-righteous. So, are you planning to make up with Tamari and the others and go back to how things were? Hearing this, Matsumi Kamiju raised an eyebrow slightly. Could it be that he had accidentally accomplished what Soyo had been striving for all this time? You should know my situation. However, upon hearing Matsumi's words, Sakiko frowned, as expected. We can't go back to the past, this isn't something I can decide. I will do my best to make it up to Tamari, but that's all I can do. Have you ever thought about telling Tamari about your current situation? I'm sure they would understand. My business has nothing to do with them. This time, it was as if a sore spot had been hit, and Sakiko became agitated instantly. Although Matsumi's song had hinted at her current situation, some things, even if tacitly understood, are different when spoken aloud. For Sakiko to bring it up herself was no different from begging for sympathy. She had always been the leader and the one everyone relied on in Krychik. This was unbearable for her pride. There's no need to tell them. As expected, Sakiko is still Sakiko, Matsumi thought. The stubborn girl who values her pride more than her life, hurting others and herself in the process. A single song clearly isn't enough to change her completely. Do you really think Tamari needs you to make it up to her? Haven't you ever considered what she truly needs? You really only think about yourself, don't you? Well, if you think that's for the best. Matsumi ultimately didn't say the comment that would have angered the girl, simply replying with a smile. The boy's perfunctory, childlike response made Sakiko inexplicably angry. However, she clearly didn't want to argue. Since she had already expressed her thanks, she prepared to turn and leave. But just then, a knock came from the door. Matsumi, can I come in? It was Tamori's voice. There's someone else here? Matsumi didn't think much of it, but Sakiko panicked instantly. The situation was compromising. Late at night, a boy and a girl alone, both in their pajamas. If someone saw them, they would definitely be misunderstood. The thought of Tamari seeing such an intimate scene made her heart pound with anxiety. Seeing Matsumi casually moving to open the door, her blood pressure soared. As his hand touched the doorknob, her thoughts in a jumble, Sakiko instinctively dove into the nearby closet, not wanting to face Tamari in this situation. Watching Sakiko's bewildering action, it was Matsumi's turn to be confused. If it were Ricky or the others, it might be a problem, but Tamari? Although the situation was indeed ambiguous, how could Tamari's innocent nature possibly misunderstand? A simple explanation would have cleared everything up. Sakiko was making things worse, digging her own grave. Matsumi? Seeing Matsumi open the door but just stare into the room without a word, Tamori couldn't help but tug on his sleeve. Come in first. Matsumi shifted his gaze back to Tamari and welcomed her into the bedroom. As for teacher Sakiko, although he thought it was unnecessary, he'd let her do as she pleased. So, what can I do for you, Tamari? Only then did Matsumi seriously observe the girl before him. Tamari might seem dazed and cute, but she was actually quite well endowed. Well, at least more so than teacher Sakiko. And her pure white pajamas perfectly accentuated her assets. Paired with that innocent, blank expression. Oh no, I'm getting ideas again. I want to thank Matsumi. The girl, who seemed to have offered herself up, appeared oblivious and spoke with a serious face. Have I done anything that deserves Tamori's thanks? Although Matsumi rarely suppressed his desires, he felt that deceiving a child was not right. Besides, with teacher Sakiko watching from the closet, if he tried anything, he would probably be stopped on the spot. Therefore, he didn't directly state his desires as he had with Anon. If it wasn't for Matsumi, Sakiko wouldn't have been like that. Hearing Matsumi's question, Tamori lowered her head, her eyes dimming slightly. Ever since leaving Krychik, Sakiko has been pushing me away. As if she hated me. I always thought, did I really do something wrong? To make everything fail. It's not your fault. But, it's because of Matsumi that I know. Hearing Matsumi's words, Tamari suddenly raised her head, meeting his gaze without any fear. Sakiko. She doesn't hate me. I don't know what Saki-chan has been through. But, she just doesn't want to hurt us. So, that's what Tamori thinks? Hiding in the closet, Sakiko's heart became complicated upon hearing Tamori's words. Chapter 62. Although Tamari seemed dazed, she actually knew everything, she just didn't say it. And she always tended to view others with kindness. At least, Sakiko knew she wasn't as good as Tamari thought. When she quit the band, her words to Tamari were just a simple emotional outburst. Afterwards, she might have had thoughts of caring for Tamari, but it was more for her own pride. Otherwise, why would she hurt Tamari again and again? Sakiko couldn't help but recall Matsumi's earlier assessment of her. Was she really as high and mighty as he said? It's all because of Matsumi that I can feel Saki-chan's true feelings. What true feelings do I have? Sakiko thought. And the band too. Tamari's eyes widened, her amber pupil shining with a color they never had before. Because of Matsumi, everyone is together. Because of Matsumi, I have courage. This was actually stealing Anon's thunder, but the pink-haired girl wasn't entirely blameless. Just as he thought while watching the anime, if she had been a bit more assertive at the karaoke, there would have been no room for Matsumi Kamaju. But you couldn't blame Saint Anon. As an ordinary popular girl, how could she have possibly tuned into the heavy gravity frequency of the Empress Tamori from the start? Plus, she was the one who let the wolf into the house, allowing Matsumi Kamaju to reap all the benefits, even surpassing his anime counterpart. After all, unlike Anon, Matsumi wasn't initially so resistant to the idea of a lifetime together, making him a perfect white knight Sakiko template for Tamari. So, I want to. Thank you. Matsumi, you won't leave like Sakiko did. Tamori's voice carried a hint of anxiety. It seemed that teacher Sakiko's departure had left a considerable psychological scar on her. Hearing Tamori's words, Sakiko felt even more self-reproach. I'm such a terrible person. Will you be in a band with me for a lifetime? Oh no, I've fallen into the black hole. Matsumi, whose hand was tightly held by Tamari, realized he had also been captured by her gravity. Subjectively, I'm of course willing, but objectively, it's actually very difficult to stay together for a lifetime just by being in a band. However, the gravity of a mere black hole was naturally not enough to make Matsumi Kamadu yield. Tamori didn't answer, but her sad expression was plain to see. But, as I've said before, even in his pajamas, Matsumi somehow pulled out a marriage registration form. As long as we get married, we can be together for a lifetime. Fight gravity with gravity. Scumbag, what are you trying to get Tamari to sign? Although Sakiko, hiding in the closet, couldn't see clearly, she could guess what he was giving Tamori just by his words. Having never witnessed such a scene, Sakiko was baffled and greatly shocked. But she felt that even Tamari wouldn't be so easily fooled by Matsumi. After all, she was just innocent, not lacking common sense. If I sign this, I can be in a band with Matsumi for a lifetime. Just as this thought crossed Sakiko's mind, Tamari slapped her with reality. Holding the marriage registration for the second time, Tamari didn't hesitate much, grabbing a pen from the bedside table and preparing to sign her name. Wait, you're really signing it? Not only Sakiko had this thought, but even Matsumi was a bit unprepared. Well, now everyone knew who was the most intense. Wait, don't sign. Seeing Tamari about to sign her name on the marriage registration form, Sakiko knew that if she did nothing, she would probably be Tamori's bridesmaid in a while. Therefore, Sakiko couldn't bother with hiding anymore and came out of the closet to stop her. Seeing teacher Sakiko suddenly appear, Tamari, as expected, tilted her head in confusion. Saki-chan, why are you in the closet? Luckily it was Tamari. If it had been anyone else, Sakiko probably couldn't have cleared her name even if she jumped into Tokyo Bay. Saki-chan, do you want this too? Seeing teacher Sakiko firmly pressing down on the marriage registration in her hand, Tamari had a moment of realization. Does Sakiko want to marry Matsumi too? Who wants to marry that guy? Tamari's question almost made teacher Sakiko choke. How did you even come to that conclusion, Tamari? And why do you look so happy that I would marry Matsumi Kamaju? Doesn't Saki-chan want to? So what are you disappointed about, Tamari? Seeing that Sakiko had no intention of marrying Matsumi with her, Tamari pulled back the marriage registration, wanting to continue signing. Hey, I said stop. Seeing Tamari's persistence, Sakiko really couldn't take it anymore. She simply snatched the marriage form from Tamari's hand. Sakiko, you're lying. If you don't want to sign, why did you snatch my marriage form? Tamari, I'm not lying. Facing Tamari's resentful gaze, Sakiko could only explain. It's just, I can't let you sign it. Sakiko-chan, why? Do you know what you're doing? Signing a marriage form. Do you know what the consequences will be? I'll have signed a marriage form. Are you just messing with me? No, signing this means getting married. Do you know that, Tamari? I know. As mentioned before, Tamari was just innocent, not without common sense. Do you know what getting married means? Being in a band for a lifetime. Tamari's voice had a light, joyful tone. No, that's not how you form a band. Sakiko was greatly shocked. Anyway, you can't get married for this reason. If you were to form a band with me, would you marry me too? Sakiko decided to use Tamori's logic to defeat Tamori. Sakiko can marry Matsumi together with me. It didn't stump her at all. Can we? Tamori looked at Sakiko with anticipation. Of course not. Sakiko was completely stunned by Tamori's logic. What on earth had happened to Tamori while she was gone? Anyway, Sakiko felt she needed to correct Tamori's skewed thinking. She didn't want to be a godmother to Matsumi and Tamori's daughter someday. Matsumi, I have something to tell you. Then, another knock came from the door. This time, it was Matsumi Togo. Having already been through this once, Sakiko was much calmer this time. She analyzed the situation. It was nighttime, she and Tamori were both in pajamas, and she was holding Tamori's half-signed marriage registration. Furthermore, she had learned at dinner that Matsumi Kamiju was apparently Matsumi Togo's fiancé. And Tamori was currently obsessed with marrying Matsumi Kamiju. Oh boy, this is bad. And so, teacher Sakiko once again dove into the closet, this time pulling Tamori in with her. Chapter 63 Seriously, what is it with teacher Sakiko and closets? And she dragged Tamori in with her? Come in, the door's unlocked. Matsumi Kamiju rubbed his temples, not even bothering to get up this time. Hearing this, Matsumi Togo opened the door from the outside and walked in. Like teacher Sakiko and Tamori, she was also wearing white pajamas, but there were some subtle differences. Matsumi. Before Kamiju could ponder what those differences were, the cucumber girl was already looking up at him and calling his name softly. Are you also here to thank me for something? This time, however, Matsumi Kamiju didn't wait for her to finish, striking first. How did you know? Matsumi Togo was completely caught off guard by his preemption, and her dazed look was incredibly cute. I've already been through the same scenario twice, how do you think I know? So, what does my dear Matsumi want to thank me for? Matsumi Kamiju didn't waste any time, wanting to skip straight to the point and get the scene over with. I'm grateful that Matsumi could help Saki-chan. As expected, it was about teacher Sakiko again, which made the girl hiding in the closet feel incredibly conflicted. She had acted so cold before, all to bear everything alone. But now it seemed she had just been making everyone around her worry. At the same time, she recalled the anime she had watched that day, and Saint Anon's accusations against her. Had she really been neglecting her childhood friend too much? Saki-chan was about to break. Matsumi Togo's assessment made Sakiko frown instantly, but due to her recent self-reproach, she managed to restrain her emotions. If Sakiko and Tamori had truly grown distant, she would definitely have regretted it. Little Matsumi really cares about Sakiko. Seeing both Tamori and Matsumi Togo coming to thank him because of teacher Sakiko, Matsumi Kamiju couldn't help but tease. I'm getting a little jealous. She was once his white moonlight, after all, a pity she's gone dark now. It's not the same. However, for some reason, Matsumi Togo seemed a little angry. Matsumi and Sakiko are different. Sakiko is just a friend. Hey, why are you using me as a prop for your flirting? Seeing Matsumi Togo eagerly trying to distance herself from her, Sakiko felt an inexplicable pain in her heart. Are they just friends? Although it was true, as Sakiko believed her own preferences were quite normal. But they were childhood friends who had grown up together, practically soulmates. She knew Matsumi Kamiju was Matsumi Togo's fiancé, but how many days had they known each other? And now Matsumi Togo was acting as if he was more important than her. This guy, after Tamori and the house, is he now going to take away Matsumi, my childhood friend? Besides, I have a thank you gift for Matsumi. And teacher Sakiko had no idea that this was just the beginning. A thank you gift? Matsumi Kamiju, who had been somewhat absent-minded, was slightly surprised. He thought it was just another run-through of the same scene, but it turned out to have triggered an extra event. As expected of Matsumi Togo, a woman of her word. Facing his gaze, the usually doll-like Matsumi Togo's face actually showed a hint of blush, as if she were shy. She nodded gently and sat on the edge of the bed. It was only then that Matsumi Kamiju finally understood the difference between Matsumi Togo and Tamori and Sakiko. Because it was bedtime, Tamori and Sakiko were naturally barefoot, but under Matsumi Togo's nightgown, her feet were wrapped in white stockings, not short socks like teacher Sakiko's, but thigh-highs. And in front of him, Matsumi Togo slowly lifted one of her slender, white-stockinged legs, looking incredibly tempting, making one want to kneel down and have a taste. Seriously, you're testing me with this? What kind of man could withstand such a test? However, Matsumi Togo felt that this wasn't enough. Although the blush on her face deepened, she still placed her hands on the sides of her thighs and slowly rolled down the white stockings, revealing her fair and tempting skin bit by bit. Finally, as the stocking came off, Matsumi Togo's jade-like, Food-grade feet were revealed. But perhaps because she came from a wealthy family, Matsumi Togo had no awareness of cherishing food, and actually placed the food directly on the floor. Then, she began to take off the stocking on her other leg. Only after both stockings were off did Matsumi Togo, blushing, stuff them into Matsumi Kamaju's hands. Wait, what do you mean by stuffing your stockings into my hands? This is the thank you gift. Matsumi Togo answered shyly. Wait, what kind of image do I have in her mind? A pervert who likes stockings? But I'm not into that. So, is it too late to explain that teacher Sakiko's stockings were actually taken by Soyo? Besides Matsumi Kamaju, who was lost in thought holding the stockings, teacher Sakiko in the closet was also in shock. Wait, are you guys this kinky in private? She had never expected that her childhood friend, who was like a pure and innocent doll in front of her, would be like this in front of someone else. And this was just what she happened to witness. She couldn't even imagine what they did when she wasn't around. Little Matsumi, you feel like a stranger to me. She was her childhood friend, but Sakiko felt like she was truly getting to know her for the first time today. And in Sakiko's arms, Tamari was also observing the bedroom through the crack in the closet door. So this is how you're supposed to thank someone? After watching Matsumi Togo's actions, Tamari realized her own thanks seemed to be merely verbal, not truly expressing her gratitude. Matsumi Kamaju was so good to her, she had to do something for him too. But, does Matsumi Kamaju like stockings? Tamari felt she had learned something new. Matsumi Togo, though looking shy enough to faint, still insisted on asking. Don't you like it? She hadn't felt any happiness from Matsumi Kamaju upon receiving the gift. Were her stockings not as good as Sakiko's? The flavor isn't authentic enough. Holding the stockings, Matsumi Kamaju replied subconsciously. To avoid any misunderstanding, let it be known that he had no particular preference for stockings. But Matsumi Togo's stockings surprisingly had no odor at all, instead carrying a light, fruity fragrance. For a connoisseur, this was clearly unacceptable. Not as strong as teacher Sakiko's. He hadn't really paid attention to that, just making a simple comparison with Matsumi Togo's. But logically, teacher Sakiko's had been marinating in her leather shoes for half a day, so they must be more flavorful than Matsumi Togo's. Wait, what am I thinking? Damn it, it must be that pervert possessing me just now. Chapter 64 Who Smells Strong? What do you mean by that? Hearing Matsumi's stocking review. Teacher Sakiko, hiding in the closet, instantly saw red. She insisted on washing her feet every day. How could they possibly have a smell? He's slandering me. I'll work harder. Sakiko's thoughts went unheard. After hearing Matsumi's evaluation, Matsumi Togo replied with a serious face. Work harder on what? Working hard on everything will be your downfall. Sakiko couldn't help but scream this in her mind. She now seriously suspected that her own childhood friend had been led astray by this bad guy, Matsumi. Anyway, you should take these back, Matsumi. Considering Tamari and Sakiko were still in the closet, Matsumi ultimately chose to return the stockings. Of course, even if they weren't there, he wasn't interested in stockings anyway. What use were they to him? He couldn't exactly use them to squeeze lemons for a drink, could he? Matsumi Togo looked slightly disappointed at having her gift returned. Since there's nothing else, you should go back and rest. After all, Sakiko and Tamori were still in the closet, and it wouldn't be good if they suffocated. It's getting late. I have another gift. However, hearing Matsumi's words, Matsumi Togo shook her head. Another one? Are we unlocking 2 CGs at once? Facing Matsumi's somewhat puzzled gaze, Matsumi Togo's cheeks turned even redder. Compared to the last time, she seemed even more hesitant this time. But, just as Matsumi was wondering what she would give him this time, the girl finally made a decision. MMPH. Compared to the world-shattering gift before, Matsumi Togo's gift this time was simple and direct. Just an ordinary kiss from a girl. But, unlike Tamori's light peck, this was a real kiss. Although it was just their lips pressing together, Matsumi could fully feel the girl's sweetness and softness, like a fruit gummy. Compared to his own childhood friend. Oh, right, he hadn't kissed his childhood friend. Somewhere else, a certain blue-haired idiot suddenly felt her head getting a little heavy. Matsumi. Since it was her first time, Matsumi Togo had no technique whatsoever. It was only when she was getting a little breathless that she pulled away from Matsumi. Am I better than Tamari? Matsumi Togo's face was flushed with an unnatural blush from the kiss, but she couldn't help but ask. Hey sister, you still remember that? Is Matsumi Togo's jealousy that strong? Besides, he hadn't really kissed Tamari, so how could he compare? Sorry, it was too short, I couldn't tell. However, how could a life-or-death question of this level stump Matsumi? Let me feel some more. Woman, you're playing with fire. Having been reincarnated, Matsumi had always believed in living in the moment. After all, he was like that before he transmigrated. If he was the same after transmigrating, wouldn't he have transmigrated for nothing? Except for special cases like Tamari, he generally wouldn't restrain his desires. As for teacher Sakiko in the closet, as long as he wasn't embarrassed, the others would be. Anyway, as long as he didn't really go too far, Matsumi believed in his steel-like willpower. However, Matsumi believed in his willpower, but Sakiko didn't. Why are they kissing again? The last time was one thing, since it was Matsumi Togo who initiated it. It was normal for an engaged couple to kiss and hug. But why were they kissing again? Had Matsumi forgotten that she and Tamori were still in the closet? Sakiko was furious, but there was nothing she could do. After all, if she went out now, it would be really hard to explain. She could only hide in the closet and watch helplessly as her childhood friend was being taken advantage of by someone else. Sakiko watched as Matsumi was held in Matsumi's arms and kissed wantonly, a strange feeling of sourness and bitterness welling up in her heart. Most importantly, Matsumi had no intention of resisting, and she was even the one who initiated it at the beginning. She couldn't help but remember the image of Matsumi in her memory, like a doll untouched by the mortal world, a stark contrast to the scene before her. Damn it, be gentle, don't hurt Matsumi. You're even using your tongue? Sakiko was completely engrossed in the scene in the bedroom, not noticing that Tamari's eyes beside her had become somewhat dazed. So, this is the correct way to kiss? I've learned something new again. But why does my body feel a little strange? Tingling and numb. At this time, Matsumi's actions in the bedroom became even more extreme. Hey, just kissing is one thing, but what are you doing with your hand inside her clothes? Sakiko, who was a bit mesmerized, finally realized something was wrong. Was Matsumi really going to study the great project of human continuation in front of her? As a former young lady, Sakiko was purer than most of her peers. She only had theoretical knowledge about this aspect and had never even seen any unhealthy videos or manga. And now, a live-action version was about to unfold before her eyes, and one of the main characters was her childhood friend, her soulmate. How could she handle this? But it wasn't as exaggerated as she thought. Although Matsumi didn't restrain his desires much, he wasn't that desperate. Besides, with Sakiko and Tamari in the closet, he wouldn't really do anything. He was just touching, nothing else. But Sakiko was already a little delirious from watching the live-action movie. Seeing that Matsumi seemed to be about to make another move, she finally couldn't take it anymore. Stop, let go of little Matsumi. Sakiko directly pulled Tamori out of the closet, wanting to stop Matsumi's further actions. However, seeing Sakiko and Tamari come out of the closet, Matsumi, who was still a little dazed, was startled. Why did Sakiko and Tamori suddenly pop out of the closet? Wait, what are you two doing hiding in my fiancé's closet? You're still kissing? Now that she was out, Sakiko didn't have so many scruples anymore. She directly vented all the emotions she had accumulated in the closet, wanting to separate Matsumi and Matsumi first. Hey, do you know where Tamari is? However, at this moment, the bedroom door was knocked again, and Ricky's somewhat urgent voice came from outside. I noticed Tamari isn't in her room, and I can't find her anywhere. In fact, after hearing Sakiko's voice, Matsumi and Matsumi had no intention of continuing to kiss, so they were easily separated by Sakiko. But Ricky's voice came at the worst possible time. Sakiko, who was already not very clear-headed, suddenly slipped and fell straight towards Matsumi. Seeing this, Matsumi instinctively caught Sakiko's body, but their faces were directly pressed together. Matsumi Togo? Chapter 65 Title, Tamari, is it my turn now? Wait, you told Matsumi to let go of me just so you could go for it yourself? For Sakiko, it was an accident. But from Matsumi Togo's perspective, it was Sakiko who suddenly rushed out of her fiancé's closet with Tamari, separated her from Matsumi, and then kissed him herself. Since when did you get so close to my fiancé? Matsumi Togo felt that even for Sakiko, this was a bit too much. Although they were soulmates and had shared everything since childhood, that didn't mean they had to share a fiancé. And standing on the side, Tamari blinked as she watched Sakiko kiss him. Why is Saki-chan kissing him now too? Does she also want to thank Matsumi? So, if you really want to thank Matsumi, is this the correct way to do it? Now I'm the only one who hasn't kissed him, this won't do. Tamori looked at Sakiko eagerly, ready to thank him herself after she was done. Matsumi was also a bit stunned by this sudden accident, and he subconsciously pursed his lips. After all, if Sakiko got a taste of cucumber, wouldn't she be getting a good deal? As for Sakiko, her feelings were incredibly complicated. Although Matsumi's action cushioned the fall, such a sudden impact certainly couldn't have felt soft or sweet. At least, Sakiko only felt a sharp pain. Then, when the girl came to her senses, her mind went completely blank. Did I just Kiss Matsumi? This was my first kiss. For a conservative former young lady like Sakiko, a first kiss, even if not on the same level as her first night, was still something very special, something that belonged only to her future husband. Although she originally had no plans for love or marriage, losing it so suddenly still made her temporarily unable to think. What's all of the noise in there? Ricky's emotions were already unstable because of Tamori's disappearance, and not getting a response made her even more irritable. Coupled with the sound of Sakiko falling onto Matsumi, Ricky simply opened the door directly, and then she saw the Tamori she had been longing for. However, you guys. Although she was happy to finally find her beloved, the two people kissing on the bed were clearly more eye-catching. What are you doing? Ricky, a pure girl who had hardly interacted with any male peers other than Matsumi, had never seen such a stimulating scene. She blushed instantly, and even her speech became slurred. So Sakiko and Matsumi are in that kind of relationship? I thought they seemed quite distant before. Wait, isn't Matsumi engaged to Matsumi Togo? If they're like this, wouldn't Matsumi Togo be? Thinking this, Ricky suddenly noticed that Matsumi Togo was sitting right there, watching the two of them kiss. Ricky's pupils dilated in shock. Is this some kind of weird play? Ricky was greatly shocked. It's not like that. Hearing Ricky's voice, Sakiko's already crashed brain finally rebooted, and she hurriedly pushed Matsumi away, wanting to explain. Then, she felt the death glare of a certain cucumber doll, and her body instantly stiffened slightly. She seemed to have forgotten that Matsumi was Matsumi Togo's fiancé. And I just... in front of her. Little Matsumi, it was just an accident. Sakiko didn't even care about losing her first kiss anymore, just wanting to explain to her childhood friend. So, you appearing in my fiancé's closet was also an accident. Although Matsumi Togo didn't speak, her eyes clearly expressed this meaning, leaving Sakiko speechless. Saki-chan just wanted to thank Matsumi. Fortunately, Tamari suddenly spoke up to help her explain. Wait, that's worse than no explanation at all. Thanking him like this? As expected, Ricky's expression became even stranger. This is how you thank someone? I didn't know you were that kind of person, Sakiko. After all, for a pure girl, thanking someone with a kiss was still too outrageous. What kind of plot is this? No. Sakiko was dumbfounded. She was thanking Matsumi, but not like this. It was purely an accident. Because little Matsumi thanked Matsumi like this before. Matsumi Togo suddenly blushed, because she realized that Sakiko and Tamari had been watching from the closet the whole time. They saw everything. And hearing Tamari's words, the expression on Ricky's face became somewhat indescribable. Matsumi Togo, you kissed him too? To be precise, Sakiko kissed him after Matsumi Togo did. This is too kinky. Is Saki-chan done thanking him? However, this was not Tamari's limit. Seeing Sakiko and Matsumi separate, she directly asked. Is it my turn now? After all, she was the only one who hadn't thanked Matsumi yet, and that wasn't right. What do you mean, your turn? What are you planning to do, Tamari? Hearing Tamori's words, a very bad premonition suddenly arose in Ricky's heart. And the next second, this premonition became a reality. MMPH. Seeing that Matsumi Togo and Sakiko didn't answer, Tamori directly held Matsumi's face and kissed him gently. This time was different from the last time. It was a real kiss, after absorbing Matsumi Togo's experience. And Matsumi Togo herself felt as if these two didn't quite see her as a person. First Sakiko, then Tamori, was Ricky next? Matsumi Togo was really about to snap. Tamari, you. Seeing the scene in front of her, the light in Ricky's eyes instantly faded. She had just sworn today to protect Tamori from a certain scumbag's harm. But it hadn't even been a day, and she saw them kissing. And Tamari was the one who initiated it. With the lights on. And right in front of her. Ricky felt a pang of bitterness in her heart. Tamari, do you really have feelings for this man? No. Ricky suddenly remembered what Tamari had said before. She seemed to be kissing Matsumi out of gratitude. The light in Ricky's eyes returned. Tamari is just being deceived, she needs me to protect her. Tamari, stop, that's not how you thank someone. Ricky stepped forward, wanting to pull the two apart just like Sakiko did. Schlick. There's even a string of saliva. How seriously were you kissing, Tamari? Ricky almost broke down again. No, it's all of this damn man's deception, my Tamari is pure and innocent. Ricky? Feeling Ricky's action, Tamari tilted her head slightly, looking at her with her watery amber eyes. Chapter 66 Title, A Cornered Cucumber Will Bite. The feeling of the real kiss was completely different from the light back before. Her whole body tingled, a sense of security she had never felt before. Do you want to thank Matsumi too? After all, Sakiko had just pulled Matsumi away and then went for it herself. Teacher Sakiko, no, I didn't, don't spread rumors. Therefore, Ricky's action naturally made Tamori suspect that she wanted to replicate the famous scene. Who wants to kiss him? Ricky instantly understood Tamori's meaning and retorted with a flushed face. Her wanting to kiss this guy? Impossible. Besides Ricky, Matsume himself was also a bit dumbfounded. Are they really going one by one? Tamori, did you even ask for my opinion? Don't tell me you're treating me as some kind of band's public ex-disposal tool? What's all the noise? Why is it so loud? At this moment, Anon also walked in, rubbing her eyes. Ricky, did you find Tamori? Then, she saw the rather delicate scene in the bedroom. What are you guys doing? Looking at the one boy and 4 girls in front of her, Anon swallowed hard and asked. Ricky wants to kiss Matsumi too. Tamori said immediately. What, Ricky wants to kiss Matsumi? Anon was completely shocked. Since when did these two get so close? I do not. Facing Anon's somewhat subtle gaze, Ricky's face turned beet red. Tamori's linguistic skills, had she not studied with a certain genius painter of the same surname as Ricky in Great Britain? But, Ricky is just like Sakiko. This time, it was teacher Sakiko's turn to get shot. So she really didn't have that thought. Tamori was on a rampage, she was practically a Superman. Wait, Sakiko did it too? However, compared to the almost numb teacher Sakiko herself, Tamori's words were a much bigger shock to Anon. And, if she remembered correctly, Tamori had just said too. Wait, you guys are having a party and didn't invite me? No, I'd rather not participate in this one. She just wanted to be a quiet band girl, she couldn't handle something this stimulating. I told you I don't have that thought. On the other side, Ricky was so angry that she was starting to speak without thinking, pointing at the newly arrived Anon. I'd rather kiss her than this guy. Although both were annoying, at least Anon was a girl. No, Ricky, you should go find someone else. Whoa, a lesbian. Suddenly being pointed at by Ricky, Anon jumped in fright. She didn't want to join the party. I'm straight. You. Seeing the trembling Anon, Ricky almost fainted from anger. She was just making a comparison. Why was this girl so jumpy? What an annoying person. My business aside for now. Ricky forcibly suppressed her soaring blood pressure and decided to solve the main problem first. Tamori, why did you just kiss this guy? Because I wanted to thank Matsumi. Tamori was quite honest. You thank someone by kissing them. Ricky felt she had to correct Tamori's wrong idea. Little Matsumi and Sakiko did it like that. The culprits were found. Ah, so that's why Tamori has such a strange idea, you guys are the ones who corrupted her. Facing Ricky's fierce gaze, teacher Sakiko had completely given up, while Matsumi's expression remained unchanged. What's wrong with me kissing my fiancé? Other people's actions aren't always correct. Ricky used the same tactic teacher Sakiko had used before, using Tamori's logic to defeat Tamori. Could it be that if Tamori wanted to thank me, she would also? Ricky's cheeks flushed slightly. Kiss me too? No. An immediate answer. This theorem was limited to Matsumi, because he liked it. Tamori still had a little bit of common sense. Why can he and I can't? However, facing Tamori's unhesitating and decisive reply, Ricky clearly broke down again. She naturally had no intention of defiling Tamori, but this differential treatment was too obvious. In Tamori's heart, was the difference between her and Matsumi that big? Ricky felt a little aggrieved. And you say you're not a lesbian? Anon naturally didn't know what Ricky was thinking. Seeing her getting agitated because of Tamori's rejection, she subconsciously took a few steps back. And looking at Ricky's pitiful state, Matsumi even felt a little sorry for her. Maybe he should kiss her now, at least she could get a taste of Tamori. Because Ricky isn't Matsumi. And Tamori, facing Ricky's question, also gave her reply. And it's not okay for girls to do that. Why are you suddenly so full of common sense now? Then what am I to Tamori? Looking at Tamori, Ricky finally couldn't help but ask this question. Ricky is my friend. Beep, friend-zoned. Indispensable, we're going to be together for a lifetime. Facing Ricky's question, Tamori held her hand seriously and said so. They were going to be in a band together for a lifetime. A lifetime. Ricky, who was still feeling down, was directly sunk by these 3 words. She was a companion who would be with Tamori for a lifetime, why was she on these things? She was just careless this time and let Matsumi take advantage of the situation. She would definitely protect Tamori next time. However, Anon on the side had a skeptical look on her face. Tamori, do you say this to everyone? Little Matsumi, what are you doing? Just as the atmosphere was gradually easing, Matsumi on the side suddenly kissed Matsumi. Anon, who was seeing such a stimulating scene for the first time, blushed instantly. Hey, you're not even trying to be discreet? Matsumi, who was suddenly attacked, also subconsciously struggled. Matsumi, don't kiss me now. You've already had your taste, what will Riki taste later? However, how could a mere Matsumi resist the current Matsumi? The actions of teacher Sakiko and Tamori, who had repeatedly treated her as if she wasn't there, had clearly stimulated the cucumber swordswoman. Even a cucumber will bite when cornered. But even so, Matsumi's actions were very gentle. She gradually neutralized and eliminated the taste that originally belonged to Tamari, leaving only the fresh fragrance of cucumber. And this time, no one would stop her. It was only when Matsumi felt it was enough that she slowly let go of Matsumi, panting slightly. Matsumi, good night. Because there had been too many accidents tonight, Matsumi didn't linger, leaving right after the kiss. The second was teacher Sakiko. She needed to calm down. Then, Riki also left with Tamari, afraid that she would continue to be bullied by Matsumi if she stayed. Did you enjoy the kiss? Only Anon was left. She looked at Matsumi, who seemed to be still savoring the moment, and asked with a hint of sarcasm. Chapter 67 Title, Soyo's Misunderstanding. It was soft, and sweet. Matsumi replied with a smile to Ms. Anon's question. I'm talking about Tamari. What do you mean? Anon was beginning to understand Riki a little. She was also seeing red. Whether it was getting to know each other or wanting to form a band together, she was the first one for everything. But just now, she was in someone else's arms, being kissed by someone else. Pain, so much pain. At this moment, Neko, who had almost fallen asleep, was awakened by the commotion. She yawned, rubbed her eyes, and peeked her head out from the doorway curiously. However, before she could see anything, she was pushed back by Anon. Don't look, you'll get a sty. Anon said to Neko, as if there was something unclean in the room. So, does Anon-chan want to give it a try too? Matsumi was unfazed by Anon's attack, instead giving a thumbs up with a smile. Little Matsumi and Tamori both tried it and said it was good. Who would want to try it? As a pure girl, Miss Anon was instantly defeated, her face turning bright red. And how could this guy say such shameless lines so naturally? He was way too impure. Humphrey, scumbag. Since Matsumi's track record for the night was indeed outstanding, and she couldn't gain any advantage verbally, for her own safety, Anon snorted, left these 3 words, and then directly pulled Neko away and fled. Neko, let's go. Seeing the girls leave, the expression on Matsumi's face finally relaxed, and he couldn't help but rub his temples. In fact, even he hadn't fully recovered from what had happened tonight. He was clearly pure as jade during the day. How did things turn out like this at night? The band girls are bullying me because I'm weak and helpless, taking turns to. Ahem. I can't let this go on, I need to recover my body quickly. Thinking this, Matsumi checked his system, and then immediately lay back down. In his current physical state, recovering seemed difficult, and in reality, it was not simple at all. The limited Gakka in Bang Dream was a no-go and for now, and the regular Gakka hadn't given him the items he needed yet, so he'd just have to leave everything to the future. When in doubt, sleep it off. However, while Matsumi slept soundly, many girls would probably be having a sleepless night. The most obvious one was probably Ms. Soyo. Anon had at most not participated in the party, but Soyo didn't even know her teammates were having a party. She even uncharacteristically didn't bombard Saki-chan, who had probably already blocked her, with messages. Instead, she spent the whole night worrying about what to do if the band really cut her out. Sakiko is back, but without Soyo. A crychick that doesn't belong to Soyo. The thought of this scene made her feel faint. She couldn't accept it at all. The next morning, you could even faintly see dark circles under the girl's eyes. She casually finished breakfast and went to school, happening to run into Matsumi at the entrance of Tsukinamori. Considering they usually arrived at school around the same time, this wasn't really a coincidence. However, since the two were still in a cold war, one-sidedly, she didn't really want to talk to Matsumi. But the photo and message Matsumi had sent yesterday lingered in her mind. After a long struggle, Soyo finally walked over. However, lost in her thoughts, she didn't notice the somewhat subtle gazes of the students around her. Is that Soyo? I never thought she had that side to her. The resemblance is uncanny. Whoa, a living Soyo and Matsumi, did I transmigrate? You don't even know Soyo-san and Matsumi-san, did you just transfer to Tsukinamori today? Soyo is going to see little Matsumi, this scene. If I came earlier, could I have seen a live-action MyGO? So what are you guys talking about? Aren't those just Soyo-san and Wakaba-san? What's MyGO? This is what happens when you don't watch MyGO. Ignoring the discussions of the young ladies around them for now, Soyo had already reached Matsumi's side. Little Matsumi, good morning. Soyo smiled and greeted Matsumi as if nothing had happened. Good morning. Contrary to what Soyo thought, Matsumi had never distanced herself from her because of what happened that night. On the contrary, it was Soyo who had been cold to Matsumi for the past 2 days due to some misunderstanding. Seeing Soyo suddenly take the initiative to talk to her, Matsumi was surprised and happy. Little Matsumi. Soyo didn't even bother with pleasantries this time, directly drawing her dagger. What exactly happened with you guys last night? Didn't you say you'd leave after watching the show? Why did you guys stay for dinner? And even Sakiko was there, but not me. And the atmosphere was much more harmonious than when I was there. What, does my presence ruin your fun? Last night. However, Soyo's conflicted expression was interpreted completely differently in Matsumi's eyes, causing the girl's face to instantly turn red. Seriously, does her fiancé tell everyone everything? Wait, it might not be Matsumi. Did Sakiko tell Soyo? Matsumi asked, not knowing how bad the relationship between Soyo and Sakiko had become. Sakiko? Matsumi's question confused Soyo. What did Sakiko tell her? How come she didn't know? And why was Matsumi blushing? Did they really have a party last night? The kiss was very nice. Seeing Soyo's reaction, Matsumi knew it probably wasn't Sakiko, and the others were unlikely to have said anything, so it could only be Matsumi. Did he use what we did to show off and provoke Soyo? Matsumi couldn't help but think this, knowing her fiancé's personality. We were both very happy. Matsumi suppressed her shyness and said so. As his fiancé, she should cooperate for now. But she would have to remind him later to be more careful and not to talk about such private matters, even with Soyo. What? You guys? However, Matsumi's words made Soyo's pupils dilate in shock, and her mind went blank. A kiss, and they were happy, you and Sakiko? What on earth did she miss last night? Lesbians were right beside me? And they were my two best friends? Soyo suddenly felt that this world was a bit strange. Damn it, have their wings gotten tangled? What a trash game, I'm not playing anymore. Chapter 68 Title, The Impact of the Anime. How could you do this? Soyo's eyes were somewhat vacant as she held Matsumi's shoulders. Kissing behind my back. Wait, how can girls do that? It's so impure. Why not? Hearing Soyo's words, Matsumi couldn't help but frown. What was wrong with her kissing her own fiancé? It's just not right. Faced with her misguided former friend, Soyo didn't know what to say. If you guys are like this, what if you corrupt little Tamari? Tamari kissed him too. Tamari's kiss was even happier than hers. What, Tamari did it too? Matsumi's words were like dozens of bands battling in her head, leaving Soyo completely stunned. Did Tamari kiss you or Sakiko? Or all three of you together? Countless permutations flashed through Soyo's mind, and the chaotic relationships made her scalp tingle. She had heard that people who play in bands often get into messy same-sex relationships. She didn't expect it to be true. And if you guys are playing like this, would Ricky agree? Soyo. At this moment, Matsumi also noticed Soyo's strange attitude. However, she was reminded of Sakiko and Tamori from last night and couldn't help but look up and ask. Do you want to join in too? Why is everyone staring at her fiancé? Matsumi was a little unhappy. Join in? However, to Soyo, this was undoubtedly an invitation to a party. Soyo's cheeks instantly turned crimson, and she hurriedly shook her head. She wanted Sakiko to come back, to return to the time when Krychik had just formed, when everyone would sing, drink tea, and chat together, not have parties every day. Although she looked like a divorced rich lady, Soyo was essentially a pure 15-year-old high school girl. She couldn't handle something so stimulating. Little Matsumi, you can't. This kind of thing is not okay. Soyo held Matsumi's shoulders again, her mind in a complete mess, her words completely incoherent. And seeing her like this, the onlooking girls couldn't help but intervene. Soyo-san, you can't bully little Matsumi. A long, black-haired young lady walked over to mediate. The first thing I see when I get to school is Soyo bullying Matsumi. Yeah, even though we know you really want to contact Sakiko-san, it's a bit too much to keep ignoring Matsumi-san, isn't it? Woo-wah-woo, my dear Matsumi, let big sister give you a hug. Don't come near me. Matsumi dodged a chestnut-haired young lady with a blank expression, while Soyo was completely confused by the crowd gathering around her. What was wrong with these people? What did her business with Matsumi have to do with them? Right, the anime. That damn Matsumi. And so, their conversation came to an abrupt end. Matsumi was surrounded and comforted by a group of upperclassmen, while Soyo was given a lecture on ideology. Things like both of them are your friends, you have to treat them equally. Soyo, who was too embarrassed to refuse rudely, had a completely vacant look in her eyes. So what's really going on with Matsumi and Sakiko and the others? She had came to Matsumi for answers, but now she was even more confused. And besides Soyo and Matsumi, the other band girls were in a similar situation. After all, after 3 episodes of build-up, This anime, which had stood out among banned anime since K-On!, was quite popular. Especially in these three schools with a strong band atmosphere, almost no one hadn't seen it. However, Riki was a little unhappy, completely oblivious to the strange gazes around her. Because Tamori was supposed to walk to school with her in the morning, but in the end, she was taken away by Anon. After all, she went to Hanasakigawa, while Anon and Tamori both went to Hanyoka. Matsumi is one thing, but you, this pink-haired girl, are bullying me too? Riki, Hanasakigawa, you've made me lose all love. And although the surrounding classmates were very curious about her as an anime character, since her role in the first 3 episodes was not very significant, and her usual emotional intelligence was also quite high, everyone just discussed in the vicinity and no one came up to talk to her. Everyone is very curious. However, Ami, who was a good friend of Riki's, was not in this category. She placed a carton of milk coffee on Riki's desk and said in a calm tone. Curious about what? Riki took the milk very naturally and asked in return. About the anime from the past 2 days. Ami-sensei had always been direct. You're also the voice actress, right? For yourself. You guys are really creative, Ami thought. Some annoying guy filmed it, insisted on dragging us to do the voice acting. The mention of Matsumi made Riki's teeth itch with hatred. Is what they say in the anime true? More or less. That's really. Although Ami knew her friend had been in a band before, she didn't expect her experience to be so exciting. She could only say that she had no words. Ami seemed surprised. Riki noticed her friend's subtle expression. Yeah, I just didn't expect. I didn't expect you to have another mom outside. On the other side, a certain blonde girl who was rarely at school looked at the two of them with a very conflicted expression. I really want to ask Riki-san about Saki-chan, Sakiko she is. On the other hand, unlike Riki, as the main characters of the first 3 episodes, Anon and Tamori received much more attention. If it weren't for staying at Matsumi's house the day before and having a private car to take them to school, they would definitely have been surrounded on the way. But even so, when they arrived at Hanyoka, they still caused quite a stir. Is this a living Tamori and Anon? Am I hallucinating? Did I transmigrate into MyGO? Tamori-san and Anon-san have always been students at our Hanyoka, didn't you know? I thought that was just an anime setting, so Hanyoka really has these 2 people? Little Tamori is our Hanyoka's mascot, you don't even know that? Really? But Tamori is really cute, hee hee hee. Could it be that our world is actually an anime? Why don't you say it's a game? Although it had only been 3 episodes, Anon and Tamori had already shown their charm. Especially Tamori, who was already known as a cute girl like a small animal. After watching the anime, everyone's pity for her had risen several levels. Woo wah woo, my Tamori, Toyoakawa Sakiko, you are a sinner. The cry chick was doing so well, why did you have to quit the band? As soon as the 2 arrived at school, a group of girls ran over to ask for autographs, greatly satisfying Miss Anon's vanity. Hee hee hee, am I already this famous oh? Chapter 69 title, I've really become an anime character. However, Anon's happiness didn't last long, because there were too many people asking for autographs. Even many who didn't want autographs crowded around, as if they were very interested in them. Drowning in a sea of Hanyoka high school girls, she didn't know what to do. In this environment, the 2 of them could barely move an inch. In the end, Miss Anon, who couldn't take it anymore, had to find a random excuse and run away with Tamori. Although she enjoyed this feeling of being a big star, they were a bit too enthusiastic, and there were too many people. Anon couldn't help but wipe the non-existent sweat from her forehead. Is the anime that scumbag filmed that popular? How come it feels like everyone has seen it? Since it was a live-action performance, Anon was too busy getting into character to pay attention to the quality of the anime. But no one should be chasing us now, right? We should be safe for now. Of course, Anon didn't dislike this feeling of being popular, she just couldn't get used to it right away. Recalling the scene just now, the corners of the girl's mouth were harder to suppress than an AK-47. I'm not that charming, there's no need to like me that much. Beside her, Tamari tilted her head in confusion, watching the person standing there grinning foolishly. After a while, the big star Miss Anon finally composed herself and went to their classroom with Tamari. And then, another group of girls surrounded them. However, perhaps because they were classmates with the 2 girls, they were more restrained and not so enthusiastic as to make Anon want to run away again. Anon-chan, was that anime based on you guys? It's so interesting. This idea is brilliant. It has a strange feeling of anime characters walking into reality. Is everything in the anime true? Tamari had such an experience. Woo wah woo, we will never hate Tamari, she's so cute. Unlike the previous group of girls, as classmates, they were more interested in the anime itself and also more compassionate towards Tamari. A group of them even seemed to have agreed to give Tamari penguin band-aids, almost filling up her desk. Even the somewhat introverted Tamari couldn't help but be moved by such a scene. Of course, she knew even better who had brought all this to her. Matsumi. Eh? Why is everyone surrounding Tamari? Is my part over already? Although Saint Anon was a Superman in the later stages, the first 3 episodes were clearly not her time to shine. Not to mention, this was Tamari's home ground, so after they finished asking their questions, most people went to surround Tamari. So the real big star isn't me, but Tamari? However, although the expression on Anon's face was a bit stiff, she naturally had no negative feelings in her heart. After all, no matter what, she wouldn't be jealous of Tamari. What's there to be jealous of with such a cute little thing? That she kissed Matsumi last night? Wait, why am I suddenly thinking about that? Miss Anon's face suddenly turned red and she shook her head. Anon, your anime is so interesting, we all love it. However, although not as popular as Tamari, Anon was definitely not ignored. But seeing the person who spoke, the expression on Anon's face froze. It was her new friends at Hanioka, the traffic light trio. Oh no, I was too proud just now, how could I have forgotten about this? Anon-chan, what's wrong? The 3 girls also noticed the change in Anon's expression and showed concerned looks. About what happened before, I'm sorry. Although Anon was a bit vain, since her true thoughts had been exposed by the anime, she still apologized honestly. Eh? What happened? Hearing her, the 3 girls showed confused expressions. It's just, about the band before, I lied to you. It was because I didn't want to stand in the corner that I rejected you. At this moment, the girls' cheeks were flushed red. After all, admitting her vanity in public was no different from a public execution for her. So that's what Anon was talking about? However, hearing her words, the traffic light trio looked at each other and then laughed out loud together. Anon-chan, you don't have to worry about it so much. It's only natural to want to be the main vocalist, we can understand. And, the scheming Anon feels even cuter. It's that, what's it called, Gapmo, right? That's right, that's it. Anon, who was originally a bit touched, had a subtle expression on her face after hearing their subsequent conversation. Don't discuss my mo points in front of me. Oh no, I feel like I've really become an anime character. Besides, if Anon joined our band, wouldn't she not be able to form a band with little Tamari? Wouldn't we be sinners? That's right, I'm an Anon Tamari shipper. It was clear that shipping was an indispensable part of watching MyGO. Doesn't anyone ship Anon Soyo? Little Tamari belongs to everyone. Heresy, Anon Ricky is the best. Are you sick? Clearly a troll. Doesn't anyone ship Anon Matsumi? That's too niche, isn't it? You guys. Watching her classmates start shipping her with the other band girls, Anon, feeling her reputation was being damaged, couldn't take it anymore, her face turning red. Don't randomly ship weird pairings. Eh? Tamari, why are you so far away from me? I'm afraid Matsumi will misunderstand. Anon. Matsumi naturally didn't know about the liveliness on the girls' side. Since he didn't need to go to school, he naturally chose to go to the company to check on the reception of MyGO after its broadcast. After all, although this anime had solid quality and no competitors, no one could guarantee that there wouldn't be any accidents before the results came out. Boss, MyGO is a real hit this time. In the Bon Animation building, Miyamori looked at the compiled data, the joy on her face barely concealable. After all, although the script was by Matsumi, they were the producers of MyGO. Although the viewership rating for the first episode was only around 8.1% because there was no promotion, it soared to 14.2% for the second episode and has been rising ever since. By the third episode, the rating has reached 15.8%. At this rate, MyGO is definitely on track to become the next K-On! After all, even in prime time, a rating of 10% was already considered excellent. And except for the first episode, MyGO's ratings were far above this standard. Of course, the highest rating of 15.8% was still far from the once phenomenal K-On! But where was MyGO now? The real highlights were all in the later episodes, that's when MyGO would truly shine. Chapter 70. And it wasn't just the anime itself. You have to remember, MyGO is a music anime. Although there were only 3 songs for now, thanks to their solid quality and the popularity of the anime, they also shot to the top of the new song download charts. Because this was the Bang Dream universe, bands were one of the mainstream cultures of this world, so the importance of music was far greater than in Matsumi's previous life. Although it wasn't much, in this world, listening to songs performed by bands on mobile apps cost money. Many bands that couldn't even release a CD relied on this to make a living. And now, the download count for those 3 Harukage songs might not be much to Matsumi, but for the band girls, it was an astronomical figure. They probably didn't even know yet that by just singing a few songs, they were already on the verge of financial freedom. Well, except for teacher Sakiko. Q, what are you going to do with the money you earned from singing? Sakiko, pay off my debts. Q, and the rest? Sakiko, the rest I'll pay back slowly. It could be said that although only 3 episodes had aired, MyGO was already a huge hit. A quick scroll through 5-channel or SNS would show people discussing this anime. MyGO is so good, why isn't the 4th episode out yet? I'm going to die without MyGO to watch, is it that good? The plot is so chaotic, and the characters aren't likable, nonsense. Tamari and Anon are so cute. Who are Tamari and Anon? You're trolling, buddy. Has anyone noticed that the voice actors and characters have the same names? What? Is there really a character named Shizuka Sakaki in the anime? No, buddy, the plot in the anime is all true. There really is a band called Krychik. I even went to their live show and heard them sing Haruokage. What the person above said is true. I'm the keyboard Sakiko plays, I'm the microphone, I'm the guitar, I'm the bass, I'm Haruokage. I'm not kidding, that's right, this band really exists. The main vocalist is my classmate. Anon almost joined my band, I can prove it. I'm Anon Shiaya, I'm Tamori Takamatsu, I'm Riki Shina, I'm Rana Kaname, no Soyo Nagasaki? Lol, well, at least Matsumi found it entertaining. It seemed like every country had its talented individuals. After that, there wasn't much for Matsumi to do. After encouraging Miyamori to work more overtime to earn money to buy him a luxury car, he was ready to leave. But just as he was about to turn off his phone, a message came through online. Soyo, what really happened with you guys yesterday? Is what little Matsumi said true? Matsumi's words to her in the morning were too shocking. She couldn't calm down without getting to the bottom of it. Capitalist, little Matsumi told you? Matsumi was slightly surprised. Why does Matsumi tell everyone everything? Is her relationship with Soyo really that good? Soyo, is what happened with little Matsumi and Sakiko true? Seeing Matsumi's reply, Soyo's heart sank. Could it be that lesbians were really right beside her? Capitalist, what about Matsumi and teacher Sakiko? What happened? Seeing Soyo's message, a question mark appeared above Matsumi's head. Did they have something going on that they were hiding from him? Soyo, but little Matsumi clearly told me. Seeing that there might be a turn of events, Soyo's eyes lit up instantly. Then, she told Matsumi all about their conversation in the morning and her thoughts. Well, what a cross-server chat. Hearing Miss Soyo's account, Matsumi did a tactical lean back. He originally thought this was a bit ridiculous, but then he remembered it was Soyo, and it immediately felt normal. As expected of you, always finding some fun for me. Capitalist, is it possible that you misunderstood? Matsumi actually considered letting Soyo continue to misunderstand, as it would be quite amusing to think about. But after careful consideration, he gave up on this idea. However, he still took a screenshot of this conversation to show to Matsumi and teacher Sakiko later, so they could have a laugh too. Soyo, so, the kissing and all that was fake? Hearing this, Soyo was instantly excited. Of course, how could little Matsumi and Sakiko do something like that? It was all a misunderstanding. Capitalist, no, that part is true, Soyo, capitalist. Teacher Sakiko's reaction was very cute, that's all I can say. Soyo, what did you do to Sakiko? Kama Soyo exploded on the other end. Good news, her best friends weren't lesbians. Bad news, her white moonlight was snatched away by a pretty boy. Now she was in the same boat as Riki. No, in a way, Soyo was even worse off than Riki. When Tamari kissed Matsumi, at least Riki was there to watch. Soyo didn't even know about it until now. Soyo, aren't you little Matsumi's fiancé? How could you do this to Sakiko? This time, Soyo remembered Matsumi's relationship with Matsumi. Capitalist, Matsumi being my fiancé doesn't mean I can't kiss Sakiko, the inequality solves it. Capitalist, besides, what happened with teacher Sakiko and me was just an accident, he could only say that no one expected something like that to happen. Could it be that teacher Sakiko had the divine fall skill? Scary. Soyo, hey, an accident, in Soyo's eyes, this was just Matsumi shirking responsibility. How could there be an accident like this? It's not like Sakiko accidentally fell on Matsumi and they just happened to kiss, right? Does he think reality is an anime or a game? How could a plot like that even happen? Soyo, was what happened with little Matsumi and Tamari an accident too? After clearing up the misunderstanding, the facts Matsumi had told her were very clear. Capitalist, the kids don't know any better, they were just kissing for fun. Soyo, are you trying to fool me like I'm a child? Although the misunderstanding was cleared up, Soyo felt inexplicably annoyed. Although she had long known how much of a scumbag this guy was, she didn't expect him to be a player too. As for why she came to this conclusion, With 3 girls having fallen into his clutches, what else could he be but a player? And this was his track record for just one night. Soyo couldn't even imagine what he would do next. She suddenly felt that Mutsumi's sudden departure from her before must have been due to Mutsumi's bewitchment. After all, they had been fine for so long, how did they get into a cold war as soon as Mutsumi arrived? Whose fault was this? It definitely wasn't her own fault. Chapter 71 Title, Soyo, I have a bold idea. And then there was Sakiko. She couldn't believe that teacher Sakiko was genuinely with Kamiju Matsumi. How could she possibly fall for that scumbag? It would be more convincing if she fell for him than if Sakiko did. Of course, now that she knew Kamiju Matsumi's true nature, she could never like such a player. But there was a problem, Sakiko was in his hands. Even Matsumi and Tomari had been deceived by him. Soyo was starting to regret trusting him in the first place. This was a classic case of letting the wolf into the henhouse. Although the situation with Matsumi Togo was a misunderstanding, the current state of affairs wasn't much better. But since things were already like this, what could she do? Wait. I've got it. Her innate skill, astounding wisdom, activated once again, and Soyo quickly came up with a plan. She believed Sakiko must have been coerced by Kamiju Matsumi. If she could rescue her from this sea of suffering, not only would it make up for her previous mistakes, but she might also win teacher Sakiko's favor. Maybe she would even return to Crychick because of it. As for the method, Ms. Soyo Nagasaki would have to sacrifice herself.